Hi, everybody. It's Matt Hawes of The Happy Show and of Comics Unlimited in Evansville, Indiana, located at 1540 Van Avenue, which is at the Big E Superstore. And the reason why I'm making this video vlog is to go over some more stuff I've been coming through whenever coming upon, I should say, whenever I go through the different stuff that I have saved in my cabinets and such. And this has a little more wear than I realized on it. But anyway, we're just after Christmas, the time that this is being filmed. It's right before the New Year's Eve's coming up. And I'm noticing, like, so there's a little bit more wear than I realized on this card. Anyway, but this is an older card here, and I'll explain why. See, Spider-Man, I'm mentioning about being New Year's and we're between Christmas and New Year's Eve. This is the last week of 2023. And and so what time to look back? To look back and reflect. So this card is not something that just anybody sent me. It was very heartfelt. No, actually, it was very much form letter, but still cool. Peace on Earth from all of us at Heroes World and Marvel Direct Sales. So some of you, especially younger people, and maybe people that just don't know the history, this has more wear on than I thought. That's kind of a bummer. I mean, it's still intact overall, but anyway, until I did this video, I didn't realize. Anyway, Heroes World was originally a regional distributor, as I understand it. That had been around for a while. When there were a time when there was many distributors of comic book companies. You had Bud Plant, you had Capital and Diamond, and a number of others. Heroes World for another one there, and there was a time in the mid '90s where it really got tight on the distribution scene, and basically what resulted was for 20 years, however long, more than 20 years, whatever the period is, where Diamond basically got a stranglehold on the industry as far as distributing comics to the direct market. Direct market is the form of distribution that distributes to comic book shops and specialty shops, as opposed to newsstand distribution, which is where periodicals and such would be sent literally to newsstands, and also to grocery stores and convenience stores and other places that where there are general kind of places for broad mass market kind of thing. Direct sales were even though we actually still went through a distributor, was meant to be more of a direct connection to the publishers. That was started in the late 70s by Phil Suling, if I'm pronouncing his name right. Name I've been familiar with for years, but I'm still not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Phil Suling was the guy who introduced the concept of the direct market approach to distribution of comic books in the comic book industry in the late 70s, roughly late 70s. And it was implemented around that time period as the 70s were closing, and the 80s became the predominant way most comic books began to be distributed, starting sometime in the mid-late 80s. Newsstand distribution was still a thing, thankfully, because it was always a mistake to rely too much on the direct market. And I say this as a person who has straighten up my shirt. There's a person who had a comic book shop for a couple decades almost, and of course it benefits the comic shops have that direct market system, but short-sighted retailers would think, and short-sighted publishers definitely found out that reliance just on the direct market was not a good thing, not solely as its own means of generating income for the overall industry, because we had our perks anyway as direct sales. In the day, I can't speak to how the newsstand distribution is now, but definitely in the years I was open and for a decade or two before I opened my shop, direct market stuff was delivered to the shops like 2 weeks prior to hitting the newsstand. So now we got our product a couple weeks ahead of time. We were able to order specific titles. We were able to order how many we wanted of those titles, which is stuff that didn't happen with newsstand distribution. Newsstand distribution, the distributor, a news distribution agency that was responsible for newspapers, magazines, other periodicals, in addition to comic books, would ship bundles of, like, the comic books would come in bundles that would go to these distributors, or I'm sorry, to these retailers, newsstand retailers, of course, meaning also grocery stores and bookstores and that weren't specialty shops and such. So they didn't get to pick the mix. They just got the mix as it came to them, and since those weren't specializing in it, they weren't specialty shops, that was fine with them, and they got them on a returnable basis, which meant they displayed it for a set period of time, usually a month, and then after that month, the new issue would come out of that particular title, and it would be replaced, and they would send that title back to the publisher, well, to the distributor who sent it back to the publisher, and that whole works there, and they would get a credit on their account or what have you for those returns. The way Phil Seuling set it up, and what enticed the publishers, Marvel, DC, and so on and so forth, to go with the specialty direct market system is that they were told that we as retailers would not send our product back to specialty shops. We would eat, in a sense, not literally, but we'd eat the cost or whatever if it didn't sell. And most shops didn't mind that because, especially in the 80s when the back issue market was pretty healthy and all, they would be able to do that. Now, I've heard said that, and I think this is somebody who should know more, but somebody thinks that the only reason why they had a direct market was to supply back issues to the retailers. It wasn't just for back issue purposes. It was because retailers comic shop owners wanted to actually be able to order comic shops. They wanted to be ordered with numbers of issues they wanted and all. It wasn't just for the creation of a back issue market, because there was no guarantee that any of those books would sell in the back issue market. I always said that getting new product on the stands is like getting a new car on a car lot, but once you take off that car lot, the value goes down the moment it leaves the car lot. Well, with new comic books, strictly speaking, not just the value could go down when you walk away with it. Strictly speaking, the value, it's not going to sell. That's not really a matter of, well, I guess it is a matter of value, but what I'm saying is that sellability, I can't talk, is lessened after the first week. So it's very important to get it, when it's new, because that's when people want to grab it. Your customers want to buy it when it's a brand new product. There are books that, of course, become collectible, but the vast majority of books actually aren't collectible. The reason why, it's all supply and demand. The reason why some books are collectible is because they're more desirable for the artist or a key appearance or whatever, and supply and demand factor all into that as well. And because there's that creates demand, the supply, anyway. This all wasn't meant to be a lesson on distribution and supply and demand and all that stuff. It's really to set up what Heroes World was all about in regard to Marvel. So we'll get back on track, so this video won't take forever. So basically, understanding what the deal is with direct market distribution. Heroes World was a distributor that Marvel bought in the 90s and decided to turn it into its own exclusive distributor, though as I recall, they did not claim that they were going to be originally just Marvel exclusive, even though Marvel owned the distributor. I cannot talk today. Anyway, so a lot of people in the industry figured, oh yeah, they're going to definitely make it exclusive to Marvel. I mean, why else would they go through the trouble and such? And so they did become their own distributor. This was pre-Disney ownership. They were owned by a man named Ron Perlman, which is not to be confused with the actor that's known as Ron Perlman, who was in the series Beauty and the Beast and Hellboy and all that. Ron Perlman, the businessman, is the guy who owned the Revlon. I guess maybe to this day he still owns Revlon if he's still alive. I haven't looked him up for a while. And Ron Perlman bought Marvel back during around this period, and he was steering the company at this time, or at least he was owning the company at that time, and he was basically wanting to turn it into Disney, ironically, before they were bought by Disney, ultimately in the decade following that. but he did not really have the infrastructure to do it properly. They were going to plan a amusement park and everything else, and the market itself was experiencing a collapse after a boom in the early 90s. There's a number of factors, but anyway, during the period of the boom, but really right towards the end of that boom, is when they bought Heroes World. Marvel bought them, then Dark Horse, DC, and Image, the three next biggest companies, reacted by signing exclusives to DC Comics, which gave Diamond Comics, Diamond Comics distributors, one of the larger distributors. They were always kind of vying for the top position with Capital, but Capital was left with the short straw in this game, and so they had Kitchen Sink and Caliber as their biggest publishers that they were able to retain in some kind of exclusive agreement, I guess, with, or I'm not sure if they had exclusive agreement, but that was the biggest publishers they had with their company after DC and others reacted to Marvel's Heroes World and went with Diamond. So Diamond Comics, in effect, had everything but Marvel, but Marvel also through mismanagement and a number of other factors went through what they started Chapter 13 bankruptcy, which is a restructuring thing. It's not literally going out of business, but it's more business, actually bankruptcy protection, really. And so they went to that and went through this period of bankruptcy. This is all happening not long after I opened my shop in 1996, coincidentally. So what an interesting time I opened up at. So if I find my letters here. Oh, okay. I want to show you some different letters getting into that. So when I opened, that there was three distributors. There was Diamond Comics to Capital Comics, and Heroes World Distribution. This was a letter sent to me in May 9th, 1996, when I got officially approved to get books through Heroes World Distribution. Dear Mr. Hawes, welcome to Heroes World. Your account application has been received, and we established an account on cash on delivery basis. See, whenever you first, as a shop, back in those days especially, it may be different again nowadays, when you first started an account, you were cash on delivery, and you had to graduate and earn a better status. Check on delivery, then you would earn terms of like net 30, I'm remembering the terms. Like net 30 would mean 30 days to pay. Before that, it was like net 7, I think is the lowest. Net 7 a week to pay, for instance. And so anyway, I was cash on delivery, of course. I was a brand new store starting out. Your Heroes account number is, I'll tell you my Heroes account number because I don't have it anymore, and Heroes World is no longer a company. It's 6064. I don't know how that can be used against me, so I'll share it with you. Please include this number on all your correspondence and checks to HWD. And if you decide to go ahead and add that number to a letter that you want to send to Heroes World distributors, go right ahead. They don't exist anymore. By submitting an order, the customer agrees to the bounded terms of sale. All customers' orders are deeming and binding and accepted within 5 days of receipt at Heroes World Distribution. We also accept MasterCard and Visa as payment. We appreciate your business and look forward to a long and prosperous relationship. It wasn't for long. But I have my setup with that distribution there. And was happy to because I went Marvel. Of course, if you're a comic book shop, you want Marvel. You want DC too. Those are the two definites there, unless you're appealing to independent crowd only. But I did want to appeal to everyone, so that's why I kept an account with Capital. Capital, like I said, really didn't have much going for it, unfortunately for them at this point in time. If you wanted Marvel, you had to go to Heroes World. If you wanted DC, Dark Horse, and Image, you had to go to Diamond because of their exclusive agreement as a reaction to Heroes World. If you wanted Capital, you didn't really need Capital, let's be honest. And that's what they found out because, unless you were strictly appealing to an alternative, independent comic book type crowd, and frankly, you gotta have more of a mass audience than that to make the dough. Hence that they're independent. and I'm saying this not as a slight about independent. I'm just saying it as economic reality. They need to have support of the mass industry to be able to do independent stuff as well, and get it any kind of outlet. But unfortunately for capital, because more people had to deal and need it with the more mass market, mass appeal stuff of DC and Marvel, they really didn't have much going for them at this point, at this juncture. And so I think they were frankly gouging us retailers too on certain things because they were going through a period of some troubles. And so I was getting in my invoices and seeing these amounts that were kind of exorbitant. And I went ahead and decided to call one day to give my complaint to Capital and say, listen, these charges, I'm not sure I agree with them, and so on and so forth. I had to call them a couple times, but this final time that I called them, they answered the phone Diamond Comics. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I meant I was calling Capital. I thought I accidentally called Diamond because I did deal with all three distributors. I went as complete of a line as I could. And they said we were bought this morning. And that is how most retailers, I understand it, many of us anyway, found out the news first that Capital was no more after however many years they'd been around. Definitely since the 80s. I can't remember, I don't remember their history if they would go back, how far back into the 70s, but they've been around a good decade, more than a decade by the time I had been dealing with them. But that's how they went under, unfortunately, and they were absorbed into Diamond, because that's who bought them. Well, that leads up to the next thing about Heroes World. So Heroes World, Marvel's characters have always, since they've become the icons they are, and certainly by 1996 they were iconic. Spider-Man was certainly iconic, Incredible Hulk and such. And even before the Marvel movies made them even more of a broader appeal and more known to, like, even Ant-Man's known now to just the general public. But they were still Marvel. They were still the number one company in 1996. Don't get confused and think that because they were filing for bankruptcy and going through all these financial woes that the company wasn't still the top dog in the industry. It was. So Marvel was too big to really fail in a sense. And at least the characters were. Somebody would have picked it up. Whether it was DC, that would have been interesting. DC could have bought the characters. Somebody was going to buy those characters if Marvel had fully fell as a company. But it was able to rebound. It rebounded after this whole deal with Chapter 13 bankruptcy. And then it got into the movie production business, which appealed to Disney, which got Disney to buy it, so on and so forth. That's a whole nother story. But Marvel did come out of this, in a better position, obviously. But at this time, it was the darkest times, perhaps, for Marvel. Probably the darkest times, at least, since they were called Marvel. The only darker period, and maybe it was even darker by comparison, and frankly, it has its own stories about distribution and all that, is in the 50s, whenever, Atlas was going through a tough time, whenever the whole comic industry was going through a tougher time for various reasons, and a major distributor had been lost, shut down, what have you, and they had to go with a distributor that was owned by their chief competitor's parent company. Marvel's distributed by DC, basically, in the late 50s, early 60s, through the mid 60s. Again, a whole nother story. My point is, there was two dark periods. The time when I opened is one of their darkest periods, and that might be the only other thing that I'm not sure where the balance is there, because they were both pretty bad. So anyway, Marvel Entertainment in 1996, December 1996, released some information about their Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I still retain a letter sent to retailers. I'm thinking, part of me thinks it's neat to have this, and part of me thinks it's like on another, just a little side thought here. I've thought about seeing if anybody's interested in this sort of thing as a historical document, but selling on eBay. Hey, I got to eat. But anyway, but it is neat to have this actually still. and I retained, like I said, a lot of stuff through the years. But Marvel had to file for Chapter 13 bankruptcy not long after the whole deal with Capital. And what they ultimately did, I'll go ahead and read you these letters, but I'll let you know what they ultimately did is Marvel went back into the fold through Diamond, because Diamond was the only viable distributor. Marvel had to kind of get its house in order, so it had to relinquish the whole Heroes World thing and sell it off, basically, and scrap plans for their theme park, and they had to kind of like tighten the belt, so to speak. Though they were still Marvel, and Marvel being the Marvel and having the clout, it still did retain, even during this period. Whenever it went back to DC, it did have some conditions and so forth. A lot of people who ordered comics through the period might remember, and still, I guess there are still to this day, is Previews Order Form, which is Diamond's catalog that was sold through comic shops, and that's also the same catalog that we as retailers would use to order from. The only difference is we had a retailer order form that was not given out to the customers. It was the retailer's form that we sent in. But you as a customer could buy the catalog. Well, the catalog prior to Marvel's deal here would have all the publishers contained in that one booklet. When Marvel came, it still had all the publishers, including Marvel, whenever they went back into the fold. But then they also got their own separate publication that was sold with previews, of a separate Marvel previews, literally a Marvel previews. And that's why they had their own separate book. DC would eventually work out a deal, I guess, if I remember, because it happened towards the time I closed my shop, but DC got its own previews too, which was many years later. It's funny it took them that long. But Marvel wanted that, of course, because they wanted it to be prominent that people be able to see their product first, even though it was already up at the front of the catalog of DC. I think DC was listed ahead of Marvel in the actual previews, the full previews, and that's probably because DC already had that guarantee. So this was Marvel's way of also trying to get edge over on DC. There's a marketing reason why it was done, of course. And so anyway, Marvel Chapter 13 bankruptcy. This was a letter sent to comic book shops to explain the situation. December 27th, 1996. I didn't do this intentionally, but I just realized, even though this is not the 27th, we're in that last week of the year, this is actually had an anniversary, this event, just in this last week. Dear valued customer, because you're an important customer of Marvel Comics Group, we want to explain an important news event which occurred today regarding Marvel Entertainment Group. This morning, Marvel Entertainment Group filed for voluntary prearranged Chapter 11 bankruptcy as part of a $525 million restructuring plan that will enable the company to fund its new strategic investment and cash needs, continue all operations without interruption, and make Toy Biz a wholly owned subsidiary. To protect our valuable relations with our business partners, we are taking steps that are not typical in this fashion. In accordance with orders granted by court, we will pay all of our bills, including those submitted prior to filing, on time and in full, and maintain normal credit terms with our suppliers and licensors. We will continue doing business with our customers and licensees under the normal business terms. We will fund and move forward with all of our new strategic investments, and employees will be paid in full and on time. We will gain a valuable new asset in Toy Biz and new funds that will allow us to face the future with strength and confidence. Under the proposed financial restructuring plan, Andrews Group Incorporated will invest $365 million in new equity in Marvel, allowing Marvel to make Toy Biz a wholly owned subsidiary of Marvel. In turn, Marvel's lender group has agreed to provide $160 million to new funds to finance Marvel's working capital requirements and new strategic investment programs in media, interactive software, and restaurants. Based on this plan, a group led by the Chase Manhattan has agreed to provide Marvel with $100 million of debtor in possession, DIP, financing to ensure that Marvel has sufficient liquidity to pay all current and expected trade and employee obligations and to meet all of its operating and investment needs during the reorganization process, which is expected to be completed within a few months. The following was necessitated by a failure of the holders of bonds issued by Marvel's holding companies to reach an agreement regarding any alternative plans for the company's future. As a result of today's petition, Marvel will be able to avail itself of the orderly process of the court in order to complete the reorganization and move forward without the necessity of a bondholder consent. Holders of Marvel Holding Company bonds were asked more than a month ago to support Marvel's plan by waiving certain restrictions contained in the bonds. However, the failure to read the failure to reach agreement with bondholders, many of whom are so-called vulture investors. Ooh, they took a shot at him. Who recently accumulated the bonds, delayed Marvel from moving forward with his plan in a timely fashion in Marvel's and your best interest. The recapitalization plan represents a strong vote of confidence by our principal shareholder, the lender group, in the fundamental strength and promise that the Marvel brand, our creative properties, business partners, licensing relationships, and strategic initiatives. There will be absolutely no interruption of our publishing schedule or development of plans for TV and feature film production, interactive products and services, licensing and sponsor partnerships, themed restaurants, and theme park attractions. It did interrupt them getting a theme park of their own. Anyway, X-Men and Spider-Man on the Fox Kids networks continues to be top-rated animated series on television. Marvel Comics continues to dominate the business with 37% market share and 16 of the top 20 comics on a monthly basis. Today's action positions us to build Marvel into an even stronger, more focused creation company for today's fans and for those of the future. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call blah, blah, blah. That number is probably not in service anymore. I don't know. I figure it's a Disney number now. The mouse owns them. So, I also have Marvel's, this a press release about Marvel Group's files for their bankruptcy right there. In part. And it's basically saying the same stuff, just a little bit restructured on how it says. Meanwhile, remember I talked about Capital? When did this happen? I've got to get the specific date for you guys. Do they give a date on this? Yes, it does. It's on the side. It's in July. Like I said, it was prior to the Heroes World thing, as I remembered it was. For immediate release. Let's see here. Diamond Comic Distributors and CEO Steve Jeppy and Capital City Distributor co-founders Milton Gripe. Again, I'm familiar with this name. I've known it for years, but don't know for sure if I'm pronouncing it right. And John Davis. I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing that right. It's a fairly simple name. Announced today that agreement has been reached whereby Diamond will acquire selected Capital City assets and begin carrying out Capital's distribution operations effective July 26, 1996. I opened on May 20th of 1996, so within 2 months, Capital was gone. Seems like it was longer, but it does make sense. Our group in reaching this agreement is to provide the best long-term distribution possible for retailers and suppliers alike. It was an interesting time. There's a lot more, but I'm giving you the gist there. And then there's more information about that whole deal. Meanwhile, there's also the paperwork I have here that's from Diamond that answers common concerns and questions about Marvel's distribution. Okay, I'm going through this again real quick. But yeah, where they were talking about how they were basically integrating them back into the fold. I dropped one of my papers. Then got in their press release. Marvel selects Diamond Comic Distributors for direct market stores. They had no other choice. I mean, at this point, Capital was now Diamond. Diamond was the only one other than Marvel as Heroes World. Where else were they going to go? But this is the press release that informs that Marvel is back over there with Diamond Comics. And I'm trying to figure out where this sheet comes from. Marvel release. My papers are all awry. So, and then there's this one here. Okay, and then this was a letter to retailers, which was saying, as announced in a closed press release, Marvel Comics will transfer the distribution of its comics, trading cards, and character merchandise currently handled by Heroes World Distribution to Diamond Comic Distributors, beginning with products arriving in stores February 26, 1997. During this transition, Heroes World will remain open for business, ready to manage outstanding customer issues or answer your questions and all that sort of stuff. So, I think we're over the half-hour mark here, so that's a good time. I guess in this one, I just want to share all that and make sure I don't have a form down there. I want to share all that information with you for this about Heroes World and Marvel and that whole interesting time period. That was the time I first set up my shop. And that's what I was dealing with as a retailer, is dealing with the collapse of Heroes World and the collapse of Capital and the restructuring of Marvel. And what an exciting time. And there's still more stuff to come. We had the reign of Bill Jemas over there at Marvel. And my own story with Bill Jemas, which is very interesting. I can tell you another video, because like I said, this one's about ready to wrap up. But you can do a search by online if you want to find out some more. You still can find by searching my name, Matt Halls or Matthew Halls. I think it's Matt Halls perhaps in some of the articles. Hawes. Bill Jemas. That's Bill, Bill, Jemas. Bill Jemas. If you're a long-time collector of comics, particularly Marvel, you may be familiar with the name. So look up Matt Hall, Google Matt Halls, Bill Jemas. Might want to throw in there like Avi Arad or like Perlmutter's name. But if you do that and retailer, maybe add the word, but Matt Halls and Bill Jemas should turn up, put Marvel maybe. Matt Halls, Marvel, and Bill Jemas. See what the results are. That would probably take you to some pages that still exist that talk about my own issues with dealing with Marvel's management at that point in time in history. And that's a whole nother story, like I said. So I'll leave you on that, but if you want to know ahead of time before I make a video, because I don't know when I'll make that video, but you can find out some of the information simply by doing that magic Google search. And I'll talk to you next time, and Happy New Year! Yay!